everybody, this is Isabel Sweet and Moises Pacheco coming live to you from Tampa. So today I am repping for MIT classes. I'm here today to discuss what it's like to perform the standard of care and use David Sweet's systems and processes after you get out of our training classes. Now, we met Moises back in 2021 before MIT Masters was ever MIT Masters. I think it was called Standards and Project Documentation, and it was that for a really long time. Then we decided to give it a little branding, and we're here. The last class that you were at was in Portland, Tennessee back in 2022, which seems so far away. I can't believe the year is pretty much gone. But he is one of the very few that have lived to tell the tale of what it's like to get out of class, actually, rubber meets the road, get out of the training and actually go apply what you've learned. And I feel like this is a really good perspective for other restorers who are on the fence about performing the standard of care or want to be more educated. This is sort of going to be just an overview of how the standard of care has affected his business and how he likes to do business and what it sort of looks like. So I know that you are located in the Crystal Lake area of Chicago, correct?
Yeah, northwest suburbs of Chicagoland, yeah.
Yeah, and you serve who generally in the area? Like how many counties and
There's about 4 or 5 counties that we serve in the greater Chicagoland area. So it's a big, large territory.
Okay, all right. And how big's your company right now? Just to give us some context.
Right now we have 3 water damage trucks, 2 estimating vehicles, and approximately 12 employees.
So yeah, so you got a good little operation going over there. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So I just want to jump straight into this and ask you. So for context for everyone who's watching, we just have an entire week of learning the standard of care. We usually start with very basic concepts that specialize in teaching and training technicians, and then we slowly move into literally we just sit there for over a week and just study and train on the standard of care. There are other things wrapped up in that, like learning how to communicate with your client. That's what we call client onboarding, learning how to use your meters, psychometrics. There's a lot of stuff that we cover, but it's all just based in a standard of care. And Moises went home, and the standard of care is almost like a buffet, right? We're not telling you need to eat all of this, but people have to choose for themselves what they will and won't perform. And as we were just discussing before this meeting, sometimes the standard of care is a matter of safety. So it's not only ethically motivated, but it has to do with how are we going to keep people safe? How are we going to keep people safe? So having that context, how much has your average gross profit per project increased since performing the standard of care when you started back in like 2021?
Well, I'm not sure about profit per se, but for sure our average ticket has gone from an average of $4,000 per job to an average of $10,000 per job now. And for us to get anything close to 4,000 is extremely small for us. Yeah, the profit wise, for sure, it's gone up exponentially since we make our profit on our equipment. So because of what we learned through your classes, our equipment is longer at job sites simply because we realized that we weren't necessarily drying to the dry standard before. So we have a drying goal and a dry standard, and we never actually achieved that per se in the past.
Right. And that's something that a lot of people usually straight out of the gate realize is that there is profitability in the standards, not because you're trying to scam people or be untruthful or not be transparent with the insurance company, with your employees and with your customer, but it's just that performing the standard of care is on not only ethical, but profitable, So how has your settlement time been affected then? I heard you say that there's been a decrease in the time that you've, had to settle in the past.
Yeah, so on average now we are settling in about 30 days with our claims. We're getting them paid in full. Now we're actually going back to our contract and allowing our customers and their carriers to understand what the wording in our contract is. But most importantly is that the customer and the age or the adjuster who reviews our paperwork doesn't have to go back and ask us for material. We submit everything up front so that we understand, or they understand, that we have nothing to hide. So
Right.
with a lot of seasoned adjusters per se, they see that there's not a lot that they can nitpick versus like the new guys. They might see our submissions as overwhelming, where they have nothing to argue, so they'll pay it.
Right, right. Sure. And what would you say the settlement date was before you were performing the standard?
A little bit over 60 days.
A little bit over 60 days. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, that's a 30-day decrease. So how, and this is a really interesting question that we were briefly touching on before as well. How has performing the standard improved your reputation or damaged it as a professional?
Well, yeah, this is like a double-edged sword, because as a whole, using the entire standard as you guys teach it helped our reputation, because now we're definitely more focused on the safety and the health of our customers and our employees. So
Mhm.
I'll give you an example just to make it a lot easier. We had a job in our local area where we were called in for a water damage job that was prolonged, and a competitor also came in to bid on the job. The customer hired the competitor to start because of the price. So their price was about half of ours. The competitor was about to start their job, and then they weren't going to do the asbestos testing. The homeowner really cared about the health and safety of their home, and they understood why we were planning to do asbestos testing, and we had it in our quote.
Mhm.
And ultimately, the homeowner canceled their contract with the company that they hired based on that aspect. The crazy part was that the home did come back positive for asbestos.
This is what I don't want to say warn, but we definitely advise people to sample, because how do you know that anything is there unless you check?
Yeah, and ultimately our bill dropped because of our demolition being a lot less. And
Right.
but the asbestos abatement company had to come in and take care of that situation.
Right. Well, and that's something that you learned in class. The sampling thing was kind of straight out of the gate, because we weren't about assuming, because it's rooted not only in the standard but in safety, like OSHA safety, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, so that's one of the almost first things that we cover, and we go straight from the standard. But would you agree that part of the reason that it might negatively affect you is just because people don't want to understand, or just don't plain flat out don't understand the standard?
Yeah. Overall, we get the biggest backlash just based on the misinformation that's out there. A lot of
Right.
people have this notion that the asbestos was banned in numbers that everybody makes numbers up, but we hear 1979, we hear 1984, and finally some people are talking about 1989 and such, but the numbers
Right.
are everywhere when asbestos was officially banned.
Mhm.
And it's kind of contrary to what their statement is of you don't have to test for it. And to us, honestly, it's not even that big of a charge to bring in the asbestos testing company. We put a little bit of an overhead and profit on there just because we pay the bill up front to the asbestos testing company, but
Right.
overall we give them the option of hiring whoever they want, but we need the clearance first.
Sure. And I remember usually when we're in class, we tell restorers, you can't just go home and just randomly charge for this out of the gate, right? You have to it depends on the community that you have around you and if everyone's doing it at once. But if it's just you in a secluded area and you're the only one charging for a sampling and testing in the area, you could experience significant pushback, especially if you're charging for it. So what, in our private consulting, and Moises knows this because we've had, numerous, calls with him. It's like, you have to ease the carrier into it. You even have to ease your client into it, because your client's not going to have that perspective, that understanding that I mentioned, that no, this is incredibly important to the safety of your home. Let's let's be familiar with the standards so that if the carrier comes back and says, oh, this isn't necessary, they have a spot to be like, no, the standards actually say this. I'm not going to know what's in my home. I'm not going to know if it's unsafe unless we check. So yes, this is important, Mr. and Mrs. Adjuster, so that's again, another thing that we go over pretty consistently.
Yeah, it's extremely important. I mean, obviously that there's a lot more testing that you guys uh, suggest that we do. We're
Sure.
personally not there yet, but I mean,
Right.
by itself is just one of the major pivots that everybody should be making.
Sure. Or how soon were you able to charge for specifically? I heard you mention asbestos. So how soon were you able to charge for that?
Immediately, I mean, if I even
Immediately.
yeah,
Okay, so this is a little different.
so,
Yeah.
and we get it done every single time now,
Right. And now that we're talking about payment, how often do you get paid for the standards?
every single time. We get pushback every once in a while, but we have our list of rebuttals per se, but we get paid every single time.
Would you say that you have a target on your back now that you perform the standard as far as payment goes?
It doesn't matter because at the end of the day, it's not we're making anything up. Again, we fully have all the documentation to support our actions, and
Right.
we're communicating this information well with our clients, so our clients do have our backs.
Right. Let's talk about your clients real quick. So, do you feel like performing the standard has made your clients happier or significantly unhappy?
It depends on the client. Every client,
Elaborate.
yeah. I mean, we found out that real quick doing this that there's a lot of people out there that really don't have a care in the world for health and safety, even in
Sure.
their own home. If it's a water damage job, then all they want is the water removed, and then they'll figure out the rest. Mold for some people doesn't exist, and
Hmm.
especially lead or asbestos, right? So it just really depends on the client. But if we have to negotiate with our client, then we absolutely will in order to get the job done. The biggest price point difference comes from the equipment rental being longer on houses, so or commercial buildings. But in general, once we explain the conditions of what we need to achieve versus what they are now,
Hmm.
most people do understand. It just depends really on the person.
Right. So, to that note, um, what would you say your advice is to anyone who's trying to balance? You need to perform the standard because you're not willing to accept liability for a wet house or for that, possible presence of asbestos or lead, or of any other known hazards. And also trying to keep your client happy so they don't end up causing problems for themselves and for the insurance company and for you later.
Well, that's what it is. It's reducing your liability. At the end of the
Right.
day, I go to bed pretty peacefully because I know that even if we don't necessarily serve all of the leads that we get in, at least the customers that we do get, I know that we serve them to the best of our abilities, and we're not putting anybody's life in danger. I've been a part of other organizations where none of this was ever brought up, even
Right.
in situations where it is common knowledge where that there could be hazards like asbestos present. That was never brought up. Personal protective equipment wasn't really issued or offered. Um, Engineering controls, never heard of them, and testing, obviously, never heard of it. So
Right.
at the end of the day, to me and what we're doing is significantly important because our company has this reputation to exceed the
The industry standard.
industry standard, which is kind of backward, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a difference in between the industry average practice and the standard of care.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's a spectrum, honestly. It's a spectrum and all kinds of people fall on all sides of the scale. But us and in our company and what we teach, we're all about raising the standard even a little, even if you just push it a little bit. You're already doing wonders for your company, for your profitability, for your morals, and for other people's safety. It's just kind of like you just win. Like you just win. Not only do you raise the bar, but all those other benefits that I mentioned. So, I mean, that leads to the question, would you say it's worth it to perform the standard?
100%. We do less work now for more profit.
Right.
And I think overall our employees completely understand what we're doing. So I think they understand that we value their health and their safety, and then we pass that on to our clients.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing your opinion and take on this, Moises. It's been great to have you. And for all of our MIT masters out there, or new people or clients, we will see you on the other side. Bye.